They say in the Wild West, two things can't stay hidden for long: the scent of blood and the eyes of a man who's decided to love a woman until death. On an August morning with silver dust curling through the Esperanza Valley, a giant cowboy rode silently toward a house forgotten by time. His name was Bo Laram. 6'8" hands like shovels and a heart folks claimed was made of stone. 3 days ago, he received a letter informing him of his brother Caleb's death. Along with it, legal documents, 2,000 acres of land, 40 cattle, a broken-down ranch house, and one additional item listed coldly as auxiliary property. Bo didn't care about property. He came back for one reason: a promise to his late mother, that if Caleb died, he would bury him next to their parents behind the ranch house. But he never expected that waiting on the porch would be a woman. Not a ranch hand, not a lawyer, a woman sewing quietly. Her hands nimble, her dress faded blue, her eyes the color of strong coffee. She didn't stand, didn't flinch, just looked up as Bo dismounted. "I'm Amara," she said without rising, without fear. "I've been here 3 years." Bo looked at her for a long time, not because of her beauty, but because something deeper moved inside him. Something that squeezed his chest like the echo of a childhood song. Her eyes held no fear, only weariness and steel, like someone who had endured too much to care about what any man thought. The house was worse than he imagined. Leaking roof, crooked barn doors, weeds growing between the floorboards. Yet Amara lived here. She gardened, cooked, mended, as though life insisted on continuing. When Bo asked why she hadn't run, she simply replied in the tone of someone talking about the weather that she had nowhere else to go, and that Caleb had owned her in a way the law in this territory still allowed. Bo felt something shift in his chest. He'd seen women beaten, traded, sold like livestock, but never one like her who had survived it all in silence, with no complaint and no surrender. That evening, in the dim kitchen lamplight, they ate dinner together, two people separated by a scarred wooden table in a house full of ghosts. Bo didn't say much, but when Amara mentioned that the town would expect him to use her the same way Caleb did, he set his cup down too hard. "And you?" he asked. "What do you expect?" She looked at him a long moment, then said something that stopped his breath. "I expect nothing, but I hope you're not your brother." Those words struck him harder than any punch. That night, Bo didn't fall asleep with the weariness of a long ride. He lay awake, chest heavy with the weight of being seen. Not for his strength, not for his name, but for the fragile possibility of being different from a man he had always hated. The next morning, Bo opened the cellar door Caleb had always called the workshop. But what he found wasn't tools. It was shackles, chains, a blood-stained table, all well used, all horrifying. When he climbed out into the daylight, his hands were shaking, his face pale with fury. Amara saw him and said quietly, "You found it." He didn't speak, just gathered every chain, every piece of iron, dragged them to the old forge and set them on fire. As the metal hissed and melted, Amara watched from the porch, her eyes reflecting the flames. He wasn't burning Caleb's legacy, he was burning his own silence. That night again, they sat together, coffee bitter, the oil lamp flickering. But something between them had changed. The space wasn't distance anymore. It was something quiet, something beginning. Bo knew in that moment he didn't just want to protect her out of guilt. He wanted more. Not possession, but partnership. And when she reached out, lightly touched the arm of his mother's old chair and asked why he told her about it, he said simply, "Because it's yours, if you want it." Amara stared at the chair like it held a crown. Not because of its value, but because it was the first time in 3 years someone told her she belonged somewhere as a person, not as property. "I'll stay," she said. And from that moment on, everything changed. Bo Laram rose before dawn the next day, his boots crunching the frost that clung to the ground like the memory of a bad winter. He wasn't used to sharing space, not with strangers, not with ghosts, and certainly not with a woman who looked him in the eye without blinking. But Amara was still asleep, curled under a wool blanket on the far side of the house in the room, Caleb once called his own. Bo didn't disturb her. Instead, he walked the fence line, or what was left of it. Broken posts leaned like old men after a long drink, and barbed wire sagged with rust and resignation. Coyotes had likely been through, maybe mountain lions too. He wasn't sure why he cared, but for the first time in years, Bo felt the weight of something worth protecting. At mid-morning, Amara emerged from the house. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid, her sleeves rolled. She carried a pail of water and a quiet resolve. "I'll fix breakfast," she said. "But the stove only takes kindling, not logs." Bo nodded. He split the wood himself. The sound echoed through the empty land like a rifle shot, sharp and final. They didn't talk much while they ate, just shared cornbread eggs and silence, the kind that doesn't press, doesn't accuse. Afterward, Bo returned to the barn, which was barely standing. Part of the roof had collapsed, and a family of raccoons had claimed it for their own. But inside, tucked behind old barrels, was Caleb's rifle. A Remington polished and oiled like it had just been used. And beside it, a journal. Bo took the journal outside, sat on the porch steps, and read it as the wind rolled dust across the fields. The entries were short, cruel. Lists of what Caleb had done, what he took, how he broke people, especially women. Some pages mentioned Amara by name, but always in terms of ownership, weight, obedience, resistance. By the third page, Bo closed the book and threw it into the same forge where the chains had burned. Amara stood nearby, drying her hands on her apron. She didn't ask what he read. She didn't need to. Instead, she asked, "Do you believe in curses, Bo?" He looked up, surprised by the question. "Depends who's doing the cursing." She gave a dry, almost bitter smile. "I think this land is cursed, not because of spirits, but because people think they can do whatever they want, and the land won't remember." Bo didn't answer right away. He stared out at the hills where nothing moved but wind and regret. "Maybe," he said at last, "but maybe it's also waiting for someone to treat it different." That night, he asked Amara if she wanted to leave, to sell the land, burn the house, and ride far from this haunted stretch of earth. Amara shook her head. "You can leave. You're not tied here. But me, I've buried too many pieces of myself in this dirt, and I don't know who I'd be if I left them behind." Bo understood that, in a way few men could, because he too had buried things. Names, mistakes, the kind you don't dig up unless you're ready to bleed. And then came the sound hooves, fast and many. Bo grabbed the rifle, heart thudding. Amara froze. 5 riders appeared from the tree line. Not bandits, deputies. One of them stepped forward, gray mustache, a tin star pinned to a leather vest. "Bo Laram," he called out. "That's me." The sheriff dismounted, boots crunching gravel. He looked around, his eyes scanning the house, the field, the woman standing on the porch. "Heard you inherited this place," he said. "That's right." "Well," the sheriff said, drawing out the word like a knife. Caleb left some things unfinished. "Questions, debts, complaints." Bo said nothing. Amara's grip on her apron tightened. "We're reopening the investigation," the sheriff added, eyeing her. "We need to ask the lady some questions." Bo stepped forward, placing himself between Amara and the deputies. "She's not going anywhere," he said. "That," so the sheriff raised an eyebrow. "That's so." A long silence followed, broken only by the horses' restless shifting. Finally, the sheriff said, "We'll be back tomorrow. Don't go far." As the riders left dust trailing behind them, Amara turned to Bo. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. Bo didn't look at her, just stared into the horizon, jaw clenched. "Yeah," he muttered. "I did. Because some promises are made with words. Others with standing your ground." And Bo Laram had just made his first real promise in years. The night after the sheriff came was restless, not for what was said, but for what hadn't been. Bo sat by the fire long after Amara had gone to sleep. He dragged an old rocking chair to the edge of the porch and stared out across the land that once belonged to his father, then to Caleb, and now to him. But the land didn't care about titles. It only remembered footsteps. The stars blinked above like eyes too tired to cry. He thought of the journal, thought of Caleb, thought of what it meant for a man to leave behind not just broken fences, but broken lives, and thought of Amara, who walked through each day as if her spirit had been splintered and reassembled one silent hour at a time. At dawn, the knock came. Not the sheriff. A girl, maybe 16, barefoot, dusty, her dress torn near the hem. Bo opened the door before she could knock again. "You don't know me," she said, not looking him in the eye. "My name's Elsie. I was here before her." Amara had come up behind him, quiet as the sunrise. She said nothing, but her breath caught. Elsie looked at her, then back to Bo. "I don't want anything. I just wanted to see, to know if it was true." What Bo asked. That Caleb was dead, and that she was still alive. Amara finally spoke. "I'm here." Elsie swallowed hard. "Then maybe I can sleep again." She turned to leave, but Bo called after her. "Wait. Do you need anything?" Elsie shook her head. "Just peace, and a place to forget." They watched her disappear down the road, feet barely touching the earth. Amara whispered there were others. "I don't know all their names." "Doesn't matter," Bo said. "We'll remember for them." They spent the day in silence, fixing the barn roof. Side by side, not speaking of what happened, but letting the work be the answer. In the late afternoon, the sheriff returned. This time, he came alone. "We talked to some folks in town," he said, stepping off his horse. "They said you've been here since yesterday. Didn't leave." Bo nodded. The sheriff eyed Amara. "We also found the boy who used to deliver supplies here. Said Caleb had a ledger. We'll need to see it." Amara spoke. "I burned it." "Why?" "Because it wasn't a ledger. It was a list of sins." The sheriff scratched his chin. "You know the law won't take that kindly." Bo stepped forward. "You want to press charges against a woman who survived him? Go ahead. But you'll do it in front of the whole town. And I'll make sure every name in that book gets spoken out loud." The sheriff stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to warn. Some men in town think a woman living here alone is an invitation." "She's not alone," Bo said, "and they can come see me if they're confused." The sheriff mounted his horse. "You're making enemies, Bo." "Good, Bo," muttered. "Means I'm finally doing something worth it." As the sheriff rode off, Amara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. They didn't speak of it that evening. Instead, Bo asked her about her garden, how she kept the tomatoes from splitting in the heat, how she coaxed life from dry soil. Amara told him stories of the herbs she planted, some for flavor, some for wounds, some just because they reminded her of where she came from, though she never said where that was. As the sun fell, they sat together on the porch. 2 chairs, 1 silence, no expectations. And when the wind shifted, carrying the scent of cedar and ash, Bo leaned back and said, "Tomorrow, I'll rebuild the fence." Amara looked over, and after that, he smiled. Not wide, not easy, but real. After that, we plant something that stays. The days grew longer, not by the clock, but by the weight of what they filled. Bo rebuilt the fence in sections, each post hammered deep, like he was staking something sacred to the earth. Amara worked in the garden, her hands always busy, but her eyes often distant. They spoke little while they worked, but something between them was speaking anyway, in quiet, in rhythm, in the way they handed each other tools without asking. On the 5th morning, Bo noticed something. Someone had been watching them. Tracks near the well. Bootprints too small to be his. Too fresh to be Amara's. Not many, but deliberate. He didn't tell her. Not yet. Instead, he sharpened the axe, oiled the rifle, moved his cot closer to the front of the house. That night, as the wind whistled through the broken boards above the porch, he sat with his hat low and his ears open. Nothing came, just the silence of a place too wide for comfort. But the next morning, there was a sign. A rope tied around the chicken coop. Loose, like someone had started a knot and then stopped. Amara saw it too. She didn't speak, but her eyes narrowed. "Someone's testing you," she said. Bo nodded. "Me or us?" "Both." They didn't eat breakfast. They sat on the porch watching the road. And by noon the visitor came. Not a rider. A preacher. Thin, sharp-nosed, wearing black. Dust on his boots, a Bible in one hand. "Mr. Laram," he said politely. "Preacher Bo," replied, not moving. Amara stood behind the screen door, half shadow, half light. "I come with a warning," the preacher said. "Some men in town are stirring trouble. They don't like that a woman stayed on here, and they like even less that you're protecting her." "Not protecting," Bo said. "Living with her. It's different." The preacher nodded. "Maybe. But to them, everything's either owned or wrong. Then they better be ready to learn new words. They don't come with words, son. They come with fire and fear." Bo looked out over the fence line he'd rebuilt. "Then let 'em come with both. This land's already burned once. It survived. So did she." The preacher tipped his hat. "You may be the one righteous man in a town full of cowards, Bo. But even righteous men get buried if they stand alone too long." Amara stepped out then. "He's not alone." Her voice didn't rise, didn't shake. But the preacher bowed slightly, as if hearing something holy. He left without blessing them. Sometimes silence is the only honest prayer. That night, Bo told Amara about the tracks near the well. She didn't flinch. "I think they'll come," she said, "sooner or later. And if they do..." Amara looked him straight in the eye. "Then we show them we're not ghosts. Not memories. Not victims. Just people who won't run." Bo couldn't sleep after that. He sat on the porch with the rifle across his knees, waiting. But it wasn't men who came that night. It was fire. A torch thrown through the barn window. Bo ran, axe in hand, water bucket in the other. Amara was already outside, shoveling dirt at the flames. They worked like hell, lungs burning, hands blistered. The barn didn't survive. But neither did the fire. When dawn broke, they stood together, covered in soot, looking at the wreckage. Bo turned to her. "We rebuild." Amara didn't answer with words. She just reached out and took his hand. And in that simple act, she made the promise louder than any sermon. The barn was gone, but the sky didn't care. The sun rose like it always did, washing the charred skeleton of what once stood with gold and indifference. Smoke still hung low, stubborn in the morning chill, but Bo and Amara didn't wait for it to clear. They were already pulling boards from the ruin, saving what they could. Amara's hands were scraped raw by noon. Bo's shoulders burned from lifting beams blackened by flame. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Their silence had shifted, not hollow, not heavy but joined. By dusk, they had a rough frame standing. 4 posts. A promise. Then came the sound of hooves. 2 riders this time. Both young, both cocky. Bo didn't reach for the rifle. Not yet. The taller one grinned. "Heard there was a woman living where a man once ruled. We came to see if she needed company." Amara stood up from the dirt, her face streaked with soot and defiance. "You came for a show," she said. "Go find a circus." The other one laughed, mouth on her hub. Bo didn't say a word. He walked slowly toward them, wiping his hands on a rag, his eyes steady. No threat, but no welcome either. "You two boys ever build a fence?" Bo asked. They exchanged glances. "Ever bury a man who beat women like it was breakfast?" Silence. Bo took another step. "Ever carry someone who stopped screaming 3 days before they stopped breathing?" The shorter one shifted in his saddle. "We didn't come to fight, mister." "Good," Bo said. "Because you'd lose." They turned their horses, kicked dust into the air, and left. When they were gone, Amara exhaled. Bo sat beside her on the edge of the frame they were rebuilding. "They'll come again," she said. "Then we'll be ready." The next morning, she found him sketching something in the dirt, a layout for a new barn, slightly smaller but stronger. He'd drawn it with the heel of his boot measuring space, with a carpenter's memory and a soldier's eye. "I want it to hold more than animals," he said. "I want it to hold something good." Amara bent down and etched a line beside his, adding a second door. "Then we build it to open wide." In town, word was spreading. Some called Bo a fool. Others called him cursed. A few, mostly the old, said maybe he was something the land hadn't seen in years, a man who didn't flinch. One afternoon, a woman came with her daughter. Quiet, thin, holding a sack of cornmeal and a jar of honey. She said nothing at first, just looked around the yard, the fence, the wreckage, the new frame rising from the ashes. "I heard what you did," she finally said. "Which part?" Bo asked. "All of it." She handed Amara the sack, "For winter," and left. After that, others came. Not many. Just enough. A man dropped off nails. An old woman brought a blanket hand-stitched. A boy came with a crate of apples and wouldn't say who sent him. It wasn't help exactly. It was witness. Acknowledgement. Like they were saying, "We see you. We remember." One night, under the orange lamp glow, Amara asked, "Do you think this can last?" Bo thought for a long moment, then said, "I don't know. But I know this. If we leave nothing but kindness nailed into the beams, it's more than he ever left." She looked at him then fully, her eyes no longer guarded. And in the quiet that followed, something shifted. Not like a confession, like a beginning. The days moved like smoke, slowly curling into one another until weeks passed without needing names. The new barn stood half done but proud, its beams straight and strong. Bo and Amara worked through sun and wind, their bodies aching in the same rhythm, their silences growing warmer. There was music once. Not much, just Amara humming low while she shelled beans on the porch, and Bo, without meaning to, tapping the rhythm on his knee with an old nail. That night, he carved 2 chairs out of the barn scraps. Not perfect, not pretty, but sturdy. He placed them side by side beneath the stars. "You made these?" she asked. He nodded. "They match." "I figured," he said, "if we're gonna keep watching the world end every night, we might as well do it comfortable." She sat, then smiled. "It's the best seat I've ever had." He sat too, and for a long time, they just looked out across the dark where coyotes howled and the wind bent grass like it was praying. The peace didn't last. It came one morning when Bo went to town for nails. Amara stayed behind planting onions by the fence line. When the first stone hit the back of her shoulder, she didn't flinch, just stood slowly. 3 boys. Not men. Not quite. Faces red with drink and ignorance. One of them held a rope. "Heard you been stealing land," one of them slurred. Amara straightened. This land was never yours to lose. They laughed, but it was a brittle laugh. "We could take it back," another said. "Take you back." Amara didn't move. "You could try." That was when they saw the dog. Big, old, scarred, but still mean enough to lower his ears and growl like thunder under the porch. "He bites," Amara said softly. They hesitated. Amara stepped forward once. Not much, just enough to say she wasn't afraid. "Tell your fathers," she said. "I remember their hands. I remember their boots." They left. Amara dropped to her knees after they were gone, not from fear, but from the weight of standing tall. When Bo returned that evening, she told him everything. He didn't speak, just held the rope they'd left behind. Then he threw it into the fire. That night he slept near the door again, rifle within reach. But no one came. Instead, in the morning, there was a pie on the porch. A simple pie, no note, just sitting there in the sun. Bo stared at it, then chuckled. Either this is kindness or the dumbest trap in town. Amara broke it in half, ate a bite. "It's kindness," she said, "and cinnamon." They laughed. Not much, but enough. It was the first time Bo had laughed since his brother died. From that day on, more pies came. Sometimes bread. Once, a pair of gloves. Always anonymous. Bo started calling them ghost gifts. Amara said maybe the dead were trying to make things right through the hands of the living. And though neither of them believed in ghosts, they stopped locking the gate. The land, it seemed, was beginning to remember mercy. And in small ways, so were they. Spring came slow to the high plains. It didn't burst through the soil in a rush of color. It crept in a softer wind, a bud on the apple tree, the sound of frogs daring to sing after a hard silence. The kind of spring that didn't make promises, but gave hints like a shy child peeking from behind a door. Bo and Amara moved through it carefully. The barn was nearly finished. The fence had held. The fields were green in places they hadn't been in years. The morning started with coffee on the porch, quiet conversations that began with weather and ended with memories. Amara talked about her mother's laugh, sharp and wild like river water. Bo spoke of his brother's boots, always a size too big, but worn like they fit. One morning, as the mist clung to the grass, a wagon rolled up the trail. It was old, sagging, pulled by a mule with one ear turned sideways. Driving it was a woman in her 60s, her back straight, her dress plain. Amara stood first. Bo followed. The woman nodded. "I heard you made a place where no one belongs and everyone does." Bo scratched the back of his neck. "We didn't mean to." "Even better," she said. "My name's Ethel, and I've got nowhere to go." Amara smiled. "Then you're already halfway home." They cleared space in the shed for her. It wasn't much, but it was dry, safe. Ethel cooked at night, something with beans and smoked pork. She talked while she stirred about the old mines, the town that once had 3 churches, the man she buried 2 winters ago. "He was mean," she said, "but he was mine." Nobody argued. After that, it was like the land had taken a deep breath and decided it could hold more stories. A boy came next. No name. Just sat by the fence one morning, legs swinging dirt on his face. "You lost?" Bo asked. The boy shook his head. "You hungry?" He nodded. Amara fed him cornbread and waited. He never told them where he came from. But he started chopping wood without being asked. They let him stay. Then came the sisters, Clara and June, women in their 40s, neither of them speaking much, but always weaving something. Baskets, nets, strands of wild grass into patterns only they seemed to understand. Bo built bunks in the barn. Amara drew a circle in the yard with stones. "What's that for?" Ethel asked. "For sitting," Amara said. "For remembering." And so they did. Each evening, someone would light a lantern. They'd gather in the circle. No ceremony. No rules. Just stories. Some told jokes. Some wept. Some just sat and listened. And through it all, Bo noticed something he hadn't seen in years. People looked each other in the eyes. They weren't afraid. They weren't pretending. They were simply together. Then one night, as the fire cracked low and the moon rose yellow behind the ridge, Amara reached over and took Bo's hand. Not like a question, like a fact, like something that had already been true for a long time, finally spoken in skin and warmth. He didn't pull away. He just held on. Long after the others had gone to sleep, they sat there, fingers linked, listening to the wind tell its endless story. And for once, the wind didn't sound lonely. The wind shifted again, not with a change in season, but with something older, heavier, like a promise made long ago, finally crawling home. For days now, Bo had been waking before the sun, standing at the edge of the barn with his eyes locked toward the southern ridge, as if he could feel footsteps pressing the dirt 2 counties away. He didn't speak of it, but everyone else felt it too. The dogs started sleeping under the floorboards again. The boys sharpened sticks without being asked. Clara and June began weaving tighter, faster, like their hands were trying to finish something before time ran out. Even Amara, who had once met death in a field and walked away without blinking, found herself touching the small of Bo's back more often just to know he was still warm. Then the letter came. It wasn't in an envelope. Just a torn piece of tobacco paper tied with horsehair dropped on the porch by a crow with one white wing. Bo read it once, then again slower. His jaw locked. When Amara asked what it said, he handed it to her. 5 words scrawled in charcoal. He's coming for what's his. She didn't need a name. Only one man in the world would speak like that. Cass Milton. They'd heard stories. Everyone had. Cass Milton wasn't a man, not really. More like a shape the dark made when it got bored. He rode with men who had numbers, instead of names, who set fires not to warm themselves but to erase maps. He was the kind of man who'd walk through a house and make the walls fall down from shame. Bo said nothing, just walked to the tool shed and pulled out the rifle wrapped in oilcloth. Ethel saw it and crossed herself without meaning to. "We gonna run?" the boy asked. "We don't run," Bo said. "Then we better build," Amara replied. And so they did. The fence was doubled, the barn reinforced. A ditch dug along the south side filled with thorn brush and broken glass. They stacked firewood like it was armor-filled jars with lamp oil, placed them along the porch rail with rags twisted tight. Claire and June braided lines of barbed wire and strung them between fence posts. The boy fashioned slingshots and lit torches every hour, watching how fast they burned. Nobody said the word war, but nobody called it peace either. They waited. Then, on the 4th morning, just as mist still clung to the low grass, like ghosts reluctant to leave, the sound came. Not thunder. Hooves. Hard, deliberate, many. The kind of sound that made birds stop singing and the dog stand with his hackles raised. Bo climbed the water tower with the spyglass. 9 men, dusted in red, rifles slung lazy. Cass, at the front, dressed in black with silver buttons, like eyes down his coat. He didn't ride fast. He didn't need to. Men like him believed the world waited on their time. They stopped 50 yards from the gate. Cass didn't speak first. He just smiled like a man already carving his name into someone else's door. Then he said, "Well now, look what you built, Bo." Bo didn't answer. Amara stood beside him, her rifle resting across her chest like a question already answered. Cass tilted his head. "Heard you got yourself a town now. Heard you're feeding ghosts and traitors." Bo stepped forward. "This land ain't yours." Cass chuckled. "Everything that breathes is mine sooner or later." "Not this," Bo said. "Not her. Not them." Cass's eyes landed on Amara, the nurse. "They talked about you down in Sweetwater. Said you stitched a man together after he tried to hang a child." Amara didn't blink. "I don't ask about sins. I stopped bleeding." Noble Cass said. "Foolish. He looked at Bo again. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for payment. What payment? Bo asked. You owe me a life. Then take mine, Bo said. You already tried once. Not yours, Cass said. Hers. Silence fell like snow. Amara's breath caught in her throat. Cass raised a finger toward her. She saved a boy once. My brother's boy. He should have died. Now, he thinks mercy is a thing that walks in dresses. I want that undone. You want her dead for being kind? Bo asked. I want her gone so the boy learns pain stays, Cass said. That's the only thing that sticks. Bo stepped back. Then come take her. Cass's men moved. They didn't get far. From the ridge behind the barn, gunfire rang out. Claire and June fired first, their shots sharp and practiced. Ethel had taken position near the ditch with a shotgun she barely held steady, but fired true. The boy lit the jars and rolled them down the hill. Fire kissed Cass's boots. His men scattered like rats from floodwater. Cass turned eyes wide. Not fear, fury. The fire lit his coat and he rode through it, screaming curses in a voice that cracked the sky. Bo aimed. Didn't shoot. Let him go, Amara said. The world knows his name. We don't have to. Cass rode off a shadow, limping into light smaller with every gallop. The wind picked up again, this time not heavy, but clean, like the sky had finally exhaled. The porch cracked beneath Bo's step as he walked to Amara and pulled her close. The others came down from the ridge, one by one. Nobody cheered, but in that silence, something sacred stirred. They hadn't just survived. They'd chosen each other over fear. They'd stood for mercy, and mercy had stood back. The morning after Cass Milton vanished into the dust, the town didn't ring with celebration. No one raised a glass, no music played, and there were no stories traded just yet. People swept the ash from the porch without speaking. They buried the bodies outside the fence in silence, not because they pitied them, but because leaving the dead above ground drew wolves. Bo stood at the gate, longer than usual, his hands resting on the top rail, watching the same horizon that had once carried him pain now stretch empty and golden like it had never known a name like Cass. Amara brought him coffee. She didn't say anything until he took a sip. What do we do now? He asked. We live, she said. That's the only thing he would have hated more than dying. It became the phrase that carried them through that month. When the fences broke in the storm, they said it. When the last of the potatoes turned soft from rain, they said it. When June twisted her ankle, chasing a calf too stubborn for its own good, she said it too. We live. The wind changed direction again, but this time it didn't bring strangers. It brought seeds. Settlers came, but not the desperate kind. These were women with calloused hands and quiet eyes, men who'd left behind wars that hadn't needed them. Some had children. One had books. They didn't come looking for land to take. They came asking what they could build. Claire began teaching children under the sycamore. Ethel taught them how to fire a rifle when needed, how to bandage a wound when not. The boy, he had a name now. Ben found an old phonograph in a wagon and fixed it using wire from a broken lantern. Music returned to the ridge, not as noise, but as memory spinning gently beneath the stars. Amara and Bo shared a bed now, but they didn't speak of marriage. Neither had room in their chest for ceremonies. Their bond wasn't born in churches or under flower arches. It had been forged in fire-blood silence and patience. Most nights, Bo would wake before her. Not from nightmares, but habit. He'd sit by the window, look out at the porch, where Cass had once threatened everything, and listen to the wind move through the grass like a lullaby. One night, she joined him, her blanket wrapped around both their shoulders. Do you think he'll come back? She asked. Bo shook his head. Men like that don't return. They rot into the land somewhere else. She leaned into him. And what about us? We stay, he said. Until this land forgets our names. Spring came harder than usual. Floods hail hungry coyotes that learned to climb. But the town didn't shrink. It grew slow and stubborn. They named it Juniper Bend after a tree that refused to break even in the worst winds. A post was driven into the ground beside the well, and someone nailed a plank to it. No one signed it. The words were "Enough mercy stays here." It was meant for strangers, yes, but it was also a promise to themselves. One afternoon, a man arrived on a lame mule with blood on his shirt and guilt in his eyes. He didn't ask for food. He just stood at the edge of the fence and said, "I heard about a place where kindness don't cost blood." Amara looked up from her garden. "Depends who's asking. I used to ride with Cass," he said, "but I stopped before the burning started." She didn't reply right away. Then she opened the gate. "We've got a broken axle on the wagon out back," she said. "You fix it. You can sleep in the hayloft." That night, he sat by the fire with them hands trembling as he passed the bread. No one asked about his past. They only asked if he liked beans. Some scars were never shown. Some didn't need to be. The town didn't preach redemption. It practiced it. Children grew taller. Fences stood stronger. One morning, Bo found a coyote pup curled on the porch, too weak to bite, too tired to run. He didn't chase it off. Instead, he set out a bowl of water and said, "You stay if you behave." The pup stayed. They named him Crow. He never barked, just watched everything like he remembered when silence had saved lives. One sunset, Amara stood in the middle of the field hair, caught in the wind eyes full of something Bo hadn't seen in her since before the cold. "You look like you're waiting," he said. "I'm remembering," she replied. "We survived something." "We did," he said. She looked at him. "Do you ever wonder why?" he thought for a moment. "Not anymore." The last of the light caught her face, then soft and golden, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't see the nurse or the fighter or the girl who gave up warmth for strangers. He saw the beginning of something else, something that didn't need a war to justify its peace. And maybe that was the real miracle. Not survival, not revenge, not even love. Just the choice made every morning to wake up and plant something that might not grow, but to plant it anyway. The town had settled into a rhythm so quiet it felt almost like a song forgotten by time. Every morning, the well creaked once the chickens complained, the fence creaked twice, and Ben's laugh echoed from somewhere it shouldn't be. Ethel had taken to painting signs for every building, schoolhouse, smithy, kitchen, even if no one needed them. "Names give things roots," she said, her brush steady despite the shake in her hands. Clara and June opened a tiny library inside the barn loft, trading bandages for books, wisdom for stories. Most of them had torn pages, but the children didn't mind. They read them aloud at night by lantern light, while Amara sat with her sewing and Bo whittled shapes from pine, each shape a little less sharp than the last. Some called it peace, but peace wasn't loud and it didn't brag. It just breathed. Still, the wind never fully forgot. And one day, it brought someone back. Not Cass. Not a stranger. It was a boy barefoot, his shirt torn, carrying nothing but a folded piece of canvas and a name he refused to speak. Ben spotted him first. "He's got that look," he whispered to Clara. "What look? The kind that ain't afraid of guns, but won't touch a plate of beans without permission." They watched him from the porch until Bo stepped out. The boy didn't flinch, didn't ask, just stood still while the dust settled on his toes. "You running?" Bo asked. The boy nodded. "Someone after you?" No answer. "You hurt anyone?" The boy shook his head. "Then you can stay a night. After that, we talk." That night, Amara made stew with dried corn and smoked rabbit. The boy didn't speak until the bowl was empty. And when he did, he said one thing: "My name's Isaac." They didn't press. Some names are offerings, not answers. Over the next days, Isaac watched everything. Watched the way Ben dug trenches for irrigation. Watched Clara hand out bread to anyone who asked. Watched Amara press a cool cloth to a man's fevered head without ever asking what got him sick in the first place. He didn't speak much, but he never missed a morning. Soon he was helping with the goats, fixing the broken hinge on the gate, and listening to stories by the fire without blinking. When the sky turned red one evening and thunder cracked without lightning, Bo pulled him aside. "You know the feeling," Bo said. "When the wind smells like iron." Isaac nodded. "He's coming," he whispered. "Who?" "My father." Amara turned to listen. "He's not like Cass," Isaac said. "He don't shout. He waits. And when he moves, no one sees him until it's too late." "Why is he coming?" "I left," Isaac said. "I wasn't supposed to." "What'd you take?" Bo asked. Isaac hesitated, then pulled out the folded canvas. Inside it was a map, hand-drawn, smudged with charcoal and ash. At the center was something marked only with a circle and the words "the route." "What is it?" Amara asked. "They said it's where everything begins," Isaac said. "And he doesn't want anyone else to find it." "What happens if we give it back?" Bo asked. "He burns us all," Isaac said. No one spoke. The wind passed like a warning. The town had survived bullets and blood. But this was different. This wasn't war or revenge. This was a question, a choice. And sometimes the heaviest burden wasn't fear, it was deciding whether to keep something safe or let it go. That night, the council gathered around the fire. No one was elected. No one had titles. But everyone knew who should speak. Bo unfolded the map on the table. "We have 3 options," he said. "Bury it, burn it, or follow it." Ethel pointed a crooked finger at the map. "You follow something like that, it owns you." Claire disagreed. "Or it frees you." Amara stayed quiet. She watched Isaac, his eyes heavy, not with hope, but guilt. Then she asked, "What would it mean to you if we followed it that someone believed me?" He said, "Even if it leads nowhere, especially." Then he whispered. Bo closed his eyes, then nodded. "We ride at dawn." Amara packed her bag in silence. 1 roll of linen, 3 vials of tincture, a clean blade, and a ribbon of blue cloth she'd never told anyone she kept since the first clinic burned. Claire handed her a book with no cover. "In case you need words," she said. Isaac watched from the doorway, his fingers twitching like they wanted to hold something but didn't know what. Bo walked past the fence line that night and looked out across the plain. No moon, no sound, but he felt it, a stirring, the beginning of something old and unfinished. He wasn't sure what the map would reveal, but he knew this, the road ahead wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about faith, not in gods or ghosts, but in one another. And maybe, just maybe, in the chance that something sacred still lay out there, waiting to be seen, waiting to be found. They left just after sunrise. No farewells, no trumpets. Just hooves, dust, and the map folded carefully inside Isaac's coat. Amara rode beside him, a small satchel slung across her back, her eyes steady on the horizon. Bo led from the front, the wind pushing against his jaw like it always did when trouble brewed beyond the ridge. 3 others joined them, Ethel, despite her age, saying, "Only I ain't done seeing yet." Claire, because someone had to record what would otherwise be forgotten, and Crow the coyote, who trotted beside the horses like he'd been waiting for this trail his whole life. The first days were easy. The land opened like a siegrass, bending beneath hoof and boot sun rising without menace. They found water where the map said they would, under a crooked cedar with a rusted horseshoe nailed to its bark. They took turns, keeping watch, though none of them could explain why. It wasn't fear of bandits. It was something quieter, like being followed by memory itself. Isaac said little, but every evening before the fire died, he'd trace the circle on the map with his finger. The route, he'd whisper like naming it, kept it real. On the 4th day, they found the first mark, a stone carved with spirals half buried in the sand. Clara sketched it. Ethel ran her fingers over it like it might sing. Bo said nothing, but the way he gripped the reins after told Amara all she needed to know. He'd seen signs like that before. On battlefields, on burial grounds. On the 6th night, they camped beneath a low ridge, where the stars spilled like spilled sugar. Amara couldn't sleep. She watched the fire burn down to breath, listened to the others dream. Isaac sat up beside her, eyes wide. I thought it would feel more holy, he said. Maybe it does, she answered. Just not the kind of holy you expect. He nodded slowly. Do you think it's real, the root? I think you needed it to be, she said, and sometimes that's enough to make it so. He didn't reply, but for the first time his shoulders lowered like some ancient weight had shifted. The next morning, they woke to smoke on the horizon. It's him, Isaac said, voice flat. They didn't argue. They rode harder. 3 miles on, they found the ashes of a camp. Not theirs. Not recent. Just bones of canvas and footprints circling nothing. Like someone had come looking and found silence. Bo stared at the tracks. He's not chasing us, he muttered. He's guiding. That night the wind brought voices. None they could understand. Whispers. Soft. Too many to count. Claire covered her ears. Ethel began to hum a lullaby. None of them knew, but all of them remembered. When morning came, Isaac said he's close. They found the canyon at noon. Wide. Empty. Carved with shapes no river could make. And there, at the center, a single tree. Dead. White bark. No leaves. But its roots spilled over the edge, like fingers reaching for something just out of grasp. The root, Isaac said, breathless. This is it? Bo asked. Isaac nodded. This is where he changed. The others spread out. Amara touched the tree. It was warm, impossibly so. Clara opened her book and began to write. Ethel just sat staring at the bones of a hawk nearby and whispered things end here. They didn't see the man until he was already there. Tall, skin like stone left in fire, eyes that knew too much. Isaac stood, didn't run. The man said nothing, just held out a hand. It belongs to no one, Isaac said. Then why carry it? The man asked. Because no one else would. The man's gaze shifted to the others, not threatening, not cruel, just tired. Bo stepped forward. Whatever this is, it ends today. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a seed. Black, pulsing. This is what you followed, he said. Not a place, not a tree. This. Isaac stepped closer. What does it grow? Memory, the man whispered. And then, before any could stop him, he pressed the seed into the root. A sound like thunder cracked the earth. The tree shuddered. Light poured from its cracks like veins remembering sunlight. The canyon trembled. Claire dropped her book. Ethel fell to her knees. Crow howled. And then, silence. When the light faded, the man was gone. The root was blooming. Not with leaves, with names. Written in bark, in flame, in wind. Isaac's among them. Amara looked at Bo. What have we done? Bo shook his head. What we had to. And behind them, the wind began to sing. They didn't speak for a long time. Not as the wind settled. Not as the last glow faded from the roots of the tree. It was Clara who first moved, picking up her notebook with shaking hands, the pages still warm to the touch. Her eyes scanned the trunk where the names had burned themselves into the bark. No order, no hierarchy, just stories etched in the language of light. Isaac's name shimmered faintly, not carved, not inked, but living. It pulsed like breath. Bo stood with his hat in his hands, staring at the place where the stranger had vanished. He wasn't chasing us, he said finally. He was returning home. Ethel let out a breath that sounded like a prayer or a goodbye. He gave the seed back to the root. Amara approached the tree and laid her palm against its trunk. It didn't burn. It didn't glow. It just accepted. So what now? Isaac asked, his voice small. Now, Bo said, turning away from the canyon, we carry it with us. Whatever this was. It's not meant to stay here. It's meant to spread. Ethel frowned. But it's a root. It stays. Bo glanced back, eyes narrow. Roots grow, he said, even across dust. And so they rode. Not back to where they'd come from, but forward, through dry valleys and into high passes, stopping in towns, forgotten by maps, among people who spoke with guarded voices and eyes that carried too many shadows. They didn't talk about the tree, not at first. But wherever they went, they planted something, sometimes a story, sometimes a truth, sometimes just silence in the shape of understanding. And something strange began to happen. Fences got mended without asking. Sick children healed faster. Letters arrived that had never been sent. One morning in a town called Dry Hollow, Clara left a page from her book nailed to the old church door. It read, "The wind remembers kindness." And someone added beneath her words, "So do we." They never stayed long. Amara tended the wounded. Bo taught the young ones how to ride. Ethel whispered names into wells and said it made the water sweeter. Isaac grew taller, quieter, but his eyes sparkled more. He didn't carry the map anymore. He didn't need to. It was inside him now. One night, around a fire in the middle of a settlement, with no name, a boy asked, "Is it true there's a place where names live forever?" Isaac nodded. "It's not a place," he said. "It's a choice." "What do you mean you choose what to remember? And who?" The boy nodded slowly, like he almost understood. Then asked, "What about the man who gave you the seed?" Isaac stared into the flames. He wasn't the beginning. He was just someone who held on too long. But he let go, and that more than anything mattered. Winter came, early and sharp. They found shelter in a broken stable with half a roof. Snow whispered against the wood like an old song trying to be remembered. Claire fell sick. Not fever, not flu, just weary. The kind of tired that sleep can't fix. Amara stayed beside her, holding her hand through the coldest nights. "I think I'm full," Clara said one morning. "Full of words, full of fire. Maybe it's time to be quiet." "You've earned it," Amara whispered. Claire smiled, closed her eyes, and didn't open them again. They buried her near a grove of ash trees, marked the ground with a stone etched in silence. Ethel sang something none of them understood, but all of them felt, after no one spoke for 3 days. Then Bo said she's part of it now. "She always was," Amara replied. Isaac took her notebook and folded it into his satchel. Not to write in, just to carry, to remember. Spring melted the snow. The world softened. The road stretched on, and still they walked it. Not for answers, not for endings, but for the stories no one else would tell, and the names no one else would carry. They came upon a town called Quiet Pass, tucked between 2 ridges, where the wind barely spoke and the sky leaned low like it was listening. No sign welcomed them. No road led out the other side, but there were houses, old and crooked windows lit with amber oil light, and a single bell tower that hadn't rung in years. The people there didn't ask questions. They watched the travelers ride in and nodded slowly, as if they'd been waiting. The mare, a thin woman with silver in her hair and soot on her sleeves, approached Bo first. "We've had dreams," she said, voice gravel soft. "The tree, the canyon, the names." Bo exchanged a glance with Amara, who stepped forward and asked gently, "Did you see him?" "No," the woman said, "but we saw what he left behind." She turned and led them toward the square. At the center stood a sculpture made from driftwood bone and riverstone. Woven into it were pieces of letters, threads of old shirts, a child's shoe. The townsfolk had built it without knowing why. "We just felt it," someone whispered. Isaac stepped closer, fingers brushing the edge of a word half burned into a plank. "Forgive." He touched his chest. The echo of the root pulsed in his ribs. "It's calling," he said. Ethel, who had grown quieter these days, nodded. "Not calling us, calling itself home." They stayed in Quiet Pass longer than anywhere else. Not because they were tired, because the town needed them. Fences had collapsed. Children were sick, and the hearts of the people had grown too quiet. Amara opened the old infirmary. She mended more than wounds. She mended songs. Isaac taught the children how to track the sun across broken rooftops. Bo rebuilt the bell tower not to ring, but to remind. And each night beside the driftwood sculpture they gathered, not to speak, not always, just to listen. The stories came slowly, one by one. A woman spoke of the son she'd lost to the mines. A man confessed he had stolen food from his neighbor for 2 winters straight. A child cried about a bird that never flew again. And no one judged. No one turned away. They simply stayed silent and warm, like walls holding up a house. On the 13th night, the sculpture began to change. Not by hands, not by tools. It grew taller. The threads wove tighter. New shapes emerged, circles, roots, names. Clara's name shimmered first. Then others they had forgotten to remember. The people wept, not from sorrow, from release. Isaac stood beneath it all and whispered, "This is what memory becomes when it's shared." The next morning, the bell tower rang. No one had touched it, but the sound rolled like thunder made of hope. The town rose early. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years broke bread. 2 old men who once fought over a mule shared coffee on a porch. A widow planted seeds where her husband had fallen. Something was shifting, not just in the town, in the land itself. Fields began to sprout green where only dust had lain. Birds returned. Laughter returned. And Bo, leaning against a post, whispered to Amara, maybe this is what he meant. Who the man with the seed? Maybe it wasn't just memory. Maybe it was forgiveness blooming. Amara smiled. Then let's not be the last to carry it. On the 21st day, they prepared to leave. The townspeople gathered in the square, hands filled with small tokens, buttons, notes, sketches, feathers, each pressed into the sculpture. They didn't say goodbye. They said thank you. And as the travelers rode out beneath the open sky, Isaac looked back one last time. The sculpture shimmered taller now than any man alive with breathless color. And behind him, the wind carried voices. Not warnings, not names, just a promise. Remember me and I will grow. They rode without haste now, not because the road was easy, but because the road was known. It no longer held mystery in its dust or fear in its bends. It simply unfolded like a story already halfway told. Each night the stars seemed a little closer. Isaac, who once clung to maps, no longer needed direction. When he walked, the path opened. When he slept, the dreams came less heavy. Bo watched him from a quiet distance, pride hidden beneath silence. Amara, ever steady, carried warmth like others carried weapons. She healed with her hands, yes, but lately it was her presence that did the mending. One night, as the fire crackled low and the coyotes kept a respectful distance, Ethel spoke up. "Do you think it's time Bo didn't ask for what he knew?" They all did. "It's not for us to say," Amara replied. "It's for the road to decide." And the road answered the next day. At sunrise, the horizon changed. What had always been open, infinite, began to narrow. Hills folded inward. The grass turned sparse. The sky leaned closer. And then they saw it. The arch. It wasn't made of stone or wood or anything crafted. It was light golden, almost translucent, curved, like the opening of a chapel or the mouth of a song. Nothing grew beneath it. No birds flew above it. It simply stood, waiting. "Is it an end?" Isaac asked. Bo shook his head. A threshold. No one urged the horses forward. They dismounted. They walked. Together. The closer they came, the quieter the world became until even their footsteps forgot to echo. At the edge, Isaac reached out. His fingers touched the light. It parted. Not like a curtain. More like a breath giving way. And beyond it was memory. Not as a place, but as a feeling. The smell of summer rain on dry wood. the sound of a mother humming while washing, the weight of a hand once held in love. Everything lost but not gone. It was all there, alive, waiting to be carried again. Ethel gasped softly. This is what the names were leading to. Bo nodded. Not a destination, a becoming. Amara stepped through. The others followed. Inside there were no walls, no ceiling, just light folding endlessly into itself. And in the center, a tree. Not the one from the canyon. Not quite, but born of it. Taller, fuller. Each branch bore a name. Claire, Isaiah, the stranger, the mother, the son, and hundreds more. Thousands. Names from across dust and silence and time. Names no longer forgotten. Isaac placed his hand on the bark. It pulsed beneath his palm. Do we stay? He asked. Bo answered, we remember. Then we return. Why return? Because there are still those who don't know their names matter. Amara stepped beside Isaac. And we still have more to carry. The tree shimmered once, then stilled, and the world outside began to call again. Softly, but clearly, they stepped back through the arch. The sky welcomed them. The dust rose in greeting, and behind them the light held. They did not speak for a while after crossing back. There was no need. The silence around them had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like breath, like rest, like the world had exhaled with them. The land stretched out quiet and calm, not healed, not perfect, but open, waiting, and the road was still long. But now they knew what they carried. Not a burden, not a curse, a remembering. They moved from one town to the next, not as strangers, not as saviors, but as witnesses. Sometimes they left behind stories, sometimes just silence, but always something grew. In one town, a grieving widow found an old song in her sleep and woke up singing. In another, two brothers who hadn't spoken in years shared coffee on the porch, neither knowing why their hearts had softened. And in the smallest village of all, a girl, barely 5, whispered to Isaac, I saw the tree too. He smiled, knelt down and said, then you're already part of it. He gave her a feather from Clara's old notebook. She tucked it in her hair like a promise. Seasons turned. Ethel grew slower, but not weaker. She spoke less, but sang more. Her voice drifted over fields at dusk and stayed with the wind. One evening, as the sun bled into the grass, she handed Isaac a slip of paper. When you forget, she said, read this. He opened it. It was blank. He looked up confused. That's what memory looks like before it's filled, she whispered. You get to decide. And she closed her eyes for the last time that night, surrounded by dusk and peace and the scent of sage. They buried her beneath an old willow near a river that no map knew. Amara planted seeds above her, and by morning they had bloomed. White flowers, the kind that only grow in memory. Time passed. The map inside Isaac never stopped shifting. Bo rode ahead, more often silent and strong. Amara kept close to those who needed tending. And Isaac, he wrote. Not stories, not names, not even history. He wrote quiet, and in that quiet something sacred unfolded. The people began to write too. Walls became pages. Stones became markers. The land itself held their truths. And once, many years later, when Isaac was older, slower, so softer, he returned to the canyon. The root was gone. The fire was gone. But the echo remained. He placed his hand on the earth and said nothing. And the wind answered, you remembered. And he smiled. Not because he was finished, but because he never had to start again. Not really. The remembering would live long after his name was forgotten. Because some stories don't need telling, only carrying. And somewhere far beyond the ridges, another child began to dream of a tree that bore her name. So if you've made it this far, Maybe something in this story stayed with you. Maybe a name. Maybe a silence. Maybe just the way the wind seemed to carry more than dust. And if it did, don't let it fade. Because somewhere out there, someone's still walking the long road, still waiting for a voice, a hand, a story to remind them they matter. So tonight, before the world goes quiet and sleep pulls you under, light a small candle. Whisper a name you've almost forgotten. Write down one memory that deserves to live again. Tell someone you've held too far away, I remember. And if this story moved you even just a little, share it. Not for us, not even for the characters. Share it so the memory keeps moving like wind between canyon walls, like fire passed from one soul to another. This isn't the end. Just one more story waiting for someone like you to carry it forward. Good night, traveler, and thank you for listening.